Hello, thank you for joining us. My name is Pam. I'm a lending specialist here with Ent Credit Union, and we're going to be discussing the purchase side of private party auto transactions. This will be one of two segments we'll help present for you and give you some education, purchasing, or selling. Let's get started. One of the biggest stressors is definitely in our finances is buying a vehicle. Not only can it be stressful, but oftentimes if we're not prepared, it can be incredibly intimidating. Our goal is to help you with confidence, help give you some great tips and resources, and have you buy a vehicle without that dreaded buyer's remorse. A couple key points, some guides that we're going to walk you through, are some extremely important steps to get set up before you even start looking. Definitely some best practices, great ideas and resources on what to look for on the titles and registrations, how to transfer ownership, those dreaded title mistakes, and the inevitable how do you pay for those tags and plates once you find the perfect vehicle. Now, again, there are important steps you need to walk through before you start looking for a vehicle. The first and foremost is definitely take a look at your budget. Now, a lot of these are going to seem like common sense, but what we see is that these are often overlooked. Your budget isn't just the car payment. Your budget is what are the taxes going to include. Your budget consists of insurance costs. What is this going to be and what is this going to look like as a package? When you're talking about your budget, there are some great resources that you can look at to determine how much will a payment look like, but also what will it cost me to own this vehicle? And what I mean by that is what do maintenance repairs cost or average? What does gas average? What might insurance averages cost for a vehicle in a sport model versus a sedan? These are things you have to consider. Some great tools, some great sites that you can look at to help with your payment as far as budgeting is concerned. There is a calculator that is called True Cost to Own, and it is located on Edmunds.com. Edmunds.com is an incredible tool that you can use not only to look at values of vehicles, but also to look at what will mechanical costs cost me over 3, 5, or 7 years. The gas averages, the basic cost for that actual vehicle. It is a wonderful, wonderful tool, especially when you would like to compare different vehicles, kind of a side-by-side comparison. To determine what a payment will look like, on Ent.com, we have a resource page with some great calculators for you as well. There is a loan calculator to help you look at what will a principal and interest payment cost on a $15,000 loan, 20, 30, or 5,000. It doesn't matter the amount. You can plug in whatever you would like or plug in how much of a payment you can afford, and it will tell you how much car to look for. When we're looking at budgets, I referenced taxes, those evil taxes. Now, there are some misconceptions that I find are very prominent. A lot of my members will let me know that they were not aware taxes had to be paid when you bought from a private seller. And unfortunately, that is the case. Yes, you pay taxes from a dealer, but you also pay taxes when you buy from a private owner. And taxes are something you need to put in that equation when you're buying a vehicle. The higher the price of the purchase, the more the taxes will be. So for example, if you live in city limits here in Colorado Springs, for example, if the tax rate is 8.25%, you're looking at over $1,200 on a $15,000 car. Now, $1,200 can make or break somebody's budget very quickly if that $15,000 is already at that higher end of their budget scale. Knowing how you're going to pay for those taxes is part of this step-by-step process you need to consider. The second piece, what are your needs? What do you need this vehicle to do for you versus what would you love for this vehicle to do for you? Do you need this vehicle to have a four-wheel drive or all-wheel drive capacity? Do you need it to have large interior space? Is there multiple car seats or a large family? Do you need it to be able to handle snow, or are you going to be driving in a sandy climate? Do you need the vehicle to be a commuter versus your family car? These are things you're going to have to identify, because if you start looking at vehicles that are not going to accommodate those needs, you're going to end up regretting the purchase and ultimately having to do this process all over again, finding a vehicle that will meet your needs. One option, one key point that a lot of buyers overlook is asking the right questions to the seller of the vehicle that they choose. Now, questions are important. Yes, a lot of us know, how do you drive the vehicle? How long have you owned it? But some questions that most people do not ask: has the vehicle been involved in a large accident? Were there major repairs done? What is the average gas mileage in town versus highway? What were your average insurance costs? This particular question is really important, in my opinion. Ask the seller where they purchased the vehicle. And what I mean by that is, did they purchase it here in state, or did they find it on eBay and Craigslist? Did they purchase it from somebody out of state? Knowing the origins of that car is important on the mechanical side. West Coast, East Coast vehicles, their weather and environments are different than in the Middle Eastern states. Is there salt in the air or salt on the roads in winter conditions? Salt can erode and rust metal very quickly. Were they in a state that was flooded? Could there be water damage you need to look for? Unfortunately, this is a buyer beware market. Knowing these types of questions will help you feel more confident in purchasing a vehicle, more confident in how you're approaching these sellers and knowing what to look for. And that's key to this type of purchase. Lastly, how are you going to pay for this lovely new vehicle? If you have been diligent and had the willpower and drive to save up the cash, that is fantastic. Congratulations. Again, make sure that you've allowed for how much taxes are going to be, and maybe call DMV. Reach out. What might registration costs run on that vehicle? If you end up financing, fantastic. Contact your lender or contact us so that you can get a pre-approval in place so that you can shop with a little more confidence and know exactly what steps need to be taken moving forward. Here's the fun part. You found the car. You know exactly what you need. You've walked through those needs and wants. You know exactly how much you can afford, and this is exciting. This is the one you want. What do? Number one, it's important you know exactly what that value is. Now, there are a couple different ways to determine value. There is a Kelley Blue Book, and there is NADA guides, both of which will help determine value. What I would like you to do is also, when you're looking at value, is read some online reviews. You can do that with Edmunds.com and NADA guides as well. Knowing exactly what some of these consumer reports have said, knowing the safety factors. Does it have enough airbags? How many recalls have they had? Again, gives you that confidence that you have chose correctly, but also that you're doing your due diligence for the safety factor on the vehicle as well. A big piece, pull a Carfax history. I referenced earlier that asking a seller about major accidents and repairs was important. Now, Carfax is a new tool to the market. You'll see those lovely little Carfoxes on your TV every once in a while. What Carfax does is it gives you a history as a resource on what type of repairs or oil changes, transfers of ownership have been done based on that VIN number and that vehicle. Now, I will caution you, Carfax is only as good as who or what has reported on that Carfax. What I mean by that is, let's say you have a fender bender, but you and the other party decide to do it without insurance involved. That type of repair may not end up on Carfax. Carfax is a tool. It is a resource. It is not 100% factual. There is room for give. But for the most part, it is an excellent, excellent resource to get a good history. How many owners that's been, how many mechanical repairs. Were there minor repairs done, like, oh no, I got hit by the grocery cart, or there was a minor fender bender, mild hail damage, or was this vehicle totaled? Carfax, again, great, great tool and resource. Now our next point, test drive the vehicle. I know that sounds absolutely ridiculous. What I will tell you is that not everybody will drive the vehicle before they buy it, nor will people actually get in the vehicles in all compartments, all areas, and inspect the vehicle. This is huge. You need to make sure that not only does it drive well, but that all the components work. When we're talking about test driving a vehicle, what I see very commonly these days is you as a buyer, as a consumer, you're looking for the best deal. Oftentimes people are using their resources like eBay, Craigslist, car buyers, or your new car buying guides to find sellers that they can find a better deal. I had one particular member who bought a vehicle through eBay from an out-of-state seller, never test drove the vehicle. They bought it sight unseen. They bought it based on pictures and what was written in the ad. By the time they bought it and got it home, they found there were major mechanical issues. There were mismatched quarter panels. The list went on and on. As I alluded to, this is a buyer beware market. You have to see these vehicles, drive them, inspect them. One other key piece to that is when you are taking a look at these vehicles, ask to see the seller's ID. Now, I know that sounds a bit intrusive, and you may ask, Pam, why? Why do I need to see their ID? The important piece here is you need to know you're dealing with the owner and the person that has the capacity to sell that car. If you're dealing with somebody that cannot actually sell that vehicle, they have no right to barter or let you purchase the vehicle. And that is a waste of your time. And to some degree, if you've actually paid that person, you may not ever be able to transfer title. That is incredibly risky. Know who you're dealing with. When we talk about driving a vehicle, inspecting the vehicle, I highly recommend taking it to a mechanic, somebody neutral. Not necessarily your friend next door who is a mechanic and you can go take the car to their driveway and have them look at it. As a seller, I would be very cautious of that, but as a buyer, I need a trusted mechanic who knows what to look for. Having them look at the roof, your headliners, what do the tires look like? How are the mechanical components working, especially with all of the new fancy components with navigation and Bluetooth and backup cameras? Have the vehicle inspected. It is worth the small amount of money if this is a vehicle you're willing to put $15,000 or $20,000 in. That way you're avoiding the unseen cost of a major repair. Now, this is the car. It makes perfect sense. The Carfax is clean. The mechanic has said, you know what? This looks great. It's been well taken care of. How do you know what to pay for the vehicle? You've looked at NADA guides. You've looked at Kelley Blue Book. You've gotten some good ranges on what a fair value or a high value might be. But where do you meet in the middle? How do you know what to pay? What I can explain is that just like high school economics with supply and demand, there are some vehicles that are going to have a higher value than others. For example, is it a vehicle that if you're at a stoplight and you can see 3 or 4 of in any one direction, that vehicle is very highly saturated in the market. Those vehicles, because you can get them anywhere, are going to have a lesser value. You can get them for less. Are you looking at a vehicle that is a higher demand vehicle. Are you in a Mountain States area trying to buy a 4-wheel drive? That's going to be a higher price point than trying to find a 2-wheel drive in a Mountain States area. Both of those factors play a role in how you agree on a price. What is the actual gas mileage? What is the actual, I'm going to say, repair value on the vehicle? Is there minor body damage? Is there major body damage? That can play a role in value. Another thing that's key is mileage. Is this vehicle extremely low mileage for its age? That's going to play a value piece. Knowing where to barter and how to barter is key. That dickering piece that I am not comfortable with, even after all these years. But considering the vehicle, the supply in the market, what is the mileage? What is the actual body condition of that car? Put that into consideration. Now, we've taken all that. We found it. The seller agrees on the price. We agree on the price. What's next? Well, the biggest thing to do is ask that seller, do you own the car outright? Do you have a title, which we refer to as being a free and clear vehicle? Or do they have a loan against it? Either one is perfectly fine. It's just important to know because it affects the steps you take. If they own it outright, it's important to ask to see the front and the back of that title. The reason that's important is you need to make sure, number one, the person selling the vehicle is the person on the title who has permission to sell it, or get a copy of that registration and they'll need to request a payoff. The payoff is important because if you're selling it and they're selling it for less than what they owe or more than what they owe, it helps with that transaction process and knowing what to do moving forward. Looking at the title or the registration, you're able to see what state it is registered and titled in. That is important because if it is different than the state you live in, it's important to contact your DMV office to see what other documentation might be necessary when you are going to title and register the vehicle and transfer ownership into your name. For example, if you're buying a vehicle that is titled out of state, especially with the local area having a lot of military, that is very common, DMV usually requires what's called a VIN verification, which means that the VIN is verified based on the registration and the tags in the car to make sure there has been no fraud in the vehicle and they can title it correctly here in Colorado. Now, we have talked about looking at those titles, looking at the registration. If you are not aware of what to look for, this can be very risky. And this is why it's important to know what you're looking at. What you want to do is compare the VIN number on that title or the VIN number on the registration to the VIN number on the vehicle. Are they selling the right car? Do you have the right copy of the right registration? You can find the VIN number very easily if you're looking at the front of the vehicle. On the left side of the dash, through the windshield, there's a clear view of the VIN. And that way you can compare VIN to the registration. Again, I know this sounds repetitive, but it is buyer beware. And honestly, we're all human. You could have grabbed the registration for a different car when you're coming to show it to somebody else and very easily flopped which registration you're showing that potential seller or buyer. Verify who's listed on that registration is the person you're working with, and that verifies with your ID. The reason being is that, again, when you're looking at buying that car, anybody that is listed on the title has to be present and sign as a seller. If they can't, it can hinder the transfer of ownership, which can make a long delayed process for you to be able to actually put the car in your name. What I think is most important about looking at those title and registrations is looking to see if this vehicle has been what we call salvaged. The 3 letters that you see, the SLV, is an abbreviation for salvaged. Some other key words that you're going to want to look for are totaled, or rebuilt. Maybe it has not actual mileage listed. These are all red flags. These are all the blinkers, the lights that go off and say, hold on, let's step back and take a look. Let's slow down. If you have a totaled vehicle, it could have been totaled because there was an accident. It could have been totaled to hail damage. It could have been totaled due to water damage. All of these things are different in levels and degree of being totaled. Totaled basically means an insurance company has said there is so much damage, we are going to pay out whatever value is left, and that's it. Most lenders will not lend on a salvaged or a totaled or rebuilt title because there is no value left to determine on that car. There is a higher chance of risk. The other piece of that, or the other side of that coin though, is if it is salvaged, it is totaled, it is also extremely difficult to get insurance on that vehicle. Important pieces to look for. I would definitely stop and pause if you see that. Number one, assess, is it worth that much risk to finance that much money into a car that has already been deemed unable to determine value? And ask your insurance agent, if you are paying cash and are willing to take that, maybe it was just hail damage, for example, versus an accident, how is the insurance going to run? Can you get full coverage? Is it only liability? Is the insurance premium higher because of that? Key points to consider. The other thing I want you to look at is with the title or with that registration, look at the odometer on the car and look at what was reported on that title. What you do not want to see is that the odometer in the car is less than what is stated on that title. Red flag. Now, we've determined we can buy this vehicle. It makes sense. Let's say the owner has the title free and clear. What do we do? Number one, for your own safety, for everybody's safety, I recommend always meeting in a well-lit, populated area. Again, this is just safety factors these days. When you're completing the ownership, you're going to want to make sure that you're completing a bill of sale as well. What a bill of sale does is it shows the date, the sale amount, all of the vehicle information, the odometer. It shows that transaction going from the seller to you. It is a legal representation of that transfer of ownership. What is a good idea, and if you're paying cash, let's say, is see if you can meet the seller maybe at their financial institution or a local DMV. That way you're in a neutral area and you have, hopefully, even if you're at DMV, a third party to help assist in that transaction. When you have the title, you have that bill of sale. On the back of the title, there is going to be a spot for the buyer and the seller. Be cautious. At this point, take your time. There is no time frame that says you have to complete a title in 30 seconds. Title mistakes can lead to huge roadblocks in titling that car where the seller may have to go get a new title. So step back, take a breath, and make sure you're filling in correctly. I have seen many transactions where we're helping with a purchase that the seller has already signed off title and has signed it incorrectly. We can no longer move forward. So again, take your time. By printing and signing your name as buyer, and as the seller printing and signing their name, you are also entering an odometer that reads off of that odometer right off the dashboard. You are acknowledging how many miles are on that car. That's important because DMV looks and makes sure there has been no odometer fraud. If there is an error, we will talk about that moving forward as well. But if you are not paying cash and you are going to be financing, what's great is that if you're financing with us, we're one of the few institutions that will actually help do that title work for you. We have DMV trained processors that will contact and schedule an appointment for you and the seller to be present, and we will walk you through step by step how to correctly fill out a title and any necessary DMV paperwork as well. Again, protecting you and the seller. Now, again, title mistakes. They're huge. They impact the sale. They stop the transaction. And it, quite frankly, can be a make or break situation if you as a buyer are not willing to wait for a seller to go get a new title. So again, this is important. If there are small mistakes, I should have put my middle initial in my signature because that's how I need it to be titled. Or the seller did not sign exactly as their name appears on the title. These are mistakes. They void a title. However, there may be one small saving grace here. It's called a statement of fact. Most DMVs will allow a statement of fact to be completed by the person who made the mistake on the title. Now, what's important here is that with this statement, it has to state there was no fraud intended and that you're signing under penalty of perjury. Again, we are human. It happens. But paying attention to the small details on a title is important. If there was a name error, again, let's use the seller as an example. It should have said John S. Smith and they just signed John Smith. That is an error. The title usually will not be accepted. You can line through the error, correct the mistake, and then have that statement of fact to say, no fraud was intended, I should have signed as this. Most DMVs will allow that to happen. I definitely would recommend contacting your local DMV to make sure. What cannot ever be amended, erased, corrected is the odometer field. If there is any alteration or DMV is not confident in how that was written, a new title can be required no matter what. And the seller is responsible for that. So again, take your time. Now, if the vehicle is financed, it's not free and clear. You don't have a title. What do I do? Number one, be aware of the entire process here, because this is a little more risky to a buyer if the seller does not have a title, because this impacts your ability to transfer ownership. Number one, how does their lender release titles? That is very important. Some lenders will allow the title to be released to someone other than the owner. So for example, I am selling my vehicle. I go to my bank and I tell them I'm selling my vehicle. Please mail the title to Jane Doe. Some lenders will do that with the owner's permission. Ent does not. But that is a super question to ask. The other thing you want to know is if the title cannot be released, how long does it take to be released? So again, here is an example. Some lenders do not have the title at their branch, at that one location. Maybe the titles are housed at their corporate office, and it can take 7 to 10 days to get that title once the loan has been paid. What do you do as a buyer? You can't go register the vehicle yet. You don't have a title. In those scenarios, you have to arrange with that seller. When you get this title, we need to arrange in a well-lit area. Where can we transfer ownership on this title? You have to stay on top of that. What I would recommend is that when you're doing that bill of sale, doing that transfer of ownership on paper to protect yourself, also get the seller's phone number, address, any contact information you have so that you do have recourse to find them. The other thing that is happening, if there isn't a paper title, Colorado, for example, has gone to what we call an electronic titling state. Lien holders are no longer holding paper physical titles any longer. So when a loan is paid off, the lender notifies DMV to then send the title to that owner. What can happen in those instances is very possibly the lender can give their owner a lien release showing the loan's been paid, and that way you can both go to DMV and transfer ownership. Secondly, if that lender is not able to do a lien release, they will notify DMV and the seller will have to go get that title from DMV in order to transfer ownership to you. These are very important questions to ask. You need to know what is the time window that you are going to be liable or in this very risky period of time where there is no title to transfer. It's important to have that bill of sale and all of those sellers' contacts information. Now, what is scary but can sometimes happen is what happens if the seller doesn't return your call? What if you never get that title? That's when it's important to have that bill of sale, all of the seller's contact information, and get with your DMV. But again, it is buyer beware. Be very cautious, but be available and aware of the next steps. Is it something you can get a paper title for with the seller? Is it something you can both go to DMV and obtain information, step-by-step process? And we're here to help our members through that and do the title transactions when they're financing. But we're also here with questions if you need them answered. All right, tags. How do you get them? How do I plate my vehicle? What you want to do is make sure that the seller does take their plates off that vehicle. And that's important because the vehicle doesn't keep the plates. The plates don't go with the car. So not having those plates on there is going to protect that seller. What is important for you as the buyer is have something in the back window. We call it an in-transit sign that lists the date of the sale, and that basically you're in transit. You're in between being able to register that vehicle because maybe you're waiting for the title. Now, what I will caution is that does not remove the risk of you getting a ticket because there are no plates on the car. But having a bill of sale, your seller's information, and that in-transit sticker shows that you are trying to be responsible until you're able to go plate the vehicle. If you paid cash and the seller gave you the title, make sure you go right to DMV with the title and your proof of insurance to complete the registration. What I'm going to again remind you of, there is taxes to pay at the time you register the vehicle as well. So there's going to be a big bill. Be prepared. If you paid cash and let's say the seller had a loan, you're going to take that bill of sale and proof of insurance to your DMV to get a temporary tag. The temporary tag says they are in process of receiving the title. In both situations, again, you will have to pay for those registration and taxes up front, so be prepared with your budget. If you end up financing your purchase as a buyer, as an Ent DMV representative, we are all able to walk through the process. We talk with DMV. We have been educated. We are experts on how to help you get through that process. We are going to give you a letter to take to DMV with your proof of insurance that will let you go get a temporary tag. So again, having information and being in contact with your lender or knowing the right steps helps you get and obtain those temporary tags. Make sure you are always contacting your insurance agent right away. That way the vehicle is placed on your policy, especially if you're going to end up financing the car. As a lender, we need to see that we are on that policy from day one. So make sure you're talking to your insurance agent about adding your lender to that policy as well. This is something that not many buyers would know to ask, so this is wonderful. If the seller has a warranty on their car, is it transferable to you? And what I mean by that is, yes, some of them that you find may have a manufacturer's warranty that transfers, but what if they bought an extended warranty? Some warranties will allow that seller to transfer any remaining coverage to you as the buyer, which is huge. You've got some mechanical help if there are costs moving forward. Or if you're financing with us, we can always quote you some great rates on warranties as well. Now, here is the wonderful part. If you're financing, how can we make it easier? And this is huge. And this is a big piece of why we're explaining and getting this information out to you. Not very many lenders actually do the paperwork for you. You'd be surprised at how many will have that buyer go and figure out the DMV process on their own. With Ent, you will have expert guidance through the whole purchase process. You're going to work with experienced processors that have that DMV knowledge and can review the titles for you, can review those documents and make sure that you're aware of what you're buying. And we're making sure that we're clear on that title so that we're able to protect you and get you on that title. We're able to do the transfer of ownership at closing with the sellers. We prepare those documents for you. We take care of paying off liens. We take care of calculating sales tax for you and filing those titles. We're able to already provide you a letter to get temporary tags. It's extremely easy as a buyer when you have somebody on your side that's looking out for your best interest. And again, we are your advocate in that sense. We have the ability to protect you and to be able to register and title the new ownership of this new car into your name. Again, the goal is to keep you educated, prepared, and the ability to register your car. Ownership is wonderful. To wrap up, what I would love to see you do, and what is a great tool for you, is on Ent.com. There is an auto buying resource guide or a checklist. Print it, use it, print as many as you want. Walk through it step by step so that you have it for any transaction that you're walking through. And as always, you have us here all the time to ask questions and let us guide you through that process, even if you aren't doing alone. That's why we're here. I'm glad you were able to join us. Join us again for our next segment on what to do as a seller. I look forward to seeing you next time.